Hello and welcome to this video where I'm going to give you 6 of my fitness secrets for power hitting, which are going to help you to consistently clear the ropes and hit big sixes just like the pros. Let's get into it. Tip number 1 has to do with Isaac Newton's third law. So Isaac Newton's third law states that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. When I push into this wall, I'm exerting a force into the wall. What the wall is then doing, because it's holding me still, the wall is exerting a force that's equal and opposite back into my arm. Now, if we think about power hitting, why this is really important is because we're understanding why we need a lot of strength when we're power hitting. So when we're in our stance, the only part of our body that is going to be able to get force is our feet, because our feet are connected to the floor. When we push down into the floor, there's an equal and opposite reaction where the floor then pushes back into us. That is where we get our energy from. So our energy comes from the floor. If we have more strength in our lower body, in our legs, then we're able to exert more force into the floor so we can push down harder, which means that the floor is going to push back harder up through our body. That energy then travels up through our body through something called the kinetic chain, which then allows us to transfer that energy through our hips, through our core and into our arms, so we can hit the ball with a lot of power. Before we get on to tips 2 to 6, it's really important that we look at the biomechanics behind power hitting. This can be broken down into a few key stages. First off, we have something called carry distance. Carry distance is the distance that we hit the ball and the outcome that we're looking to achieve. Carry distance is then dependent on 2 factors. So these factors are 1, launch angle, the angle that the ball comes off the bat. The second is launch speed. Let's first look at launch angle. Launch angle is dependent on bat angle. So the angle of the bat, dependent on where you make contact with the ball, it's going to impact the trajectory. If you have a shallower bat angle, the ball's going to go flatter and not go as far. But if it's too steep and the ball goes too high, then you're going to get out and get caught. Ideally, the bat angle wants to be about 45 degrees, so the trajectory is kind of diagonal into the air. Ultimately though, the bat angle isn't something that me, as an S&C coach, is looking to impact in your game. So I'm more interested in your launch speed. Launch speed is then impacted by 2 things. First thing is impact location. So where on the bat you make contact with the ball. If you hit the ball in the middle of the bat, obviously it's going to go further. Once again, that isn't something that I'm looking to impact you, drawing on my hand, impact you as an S&C coach. But what I can impact is your bat speed. So bat speed is the thing that I'm really interested in, and that is dependent on 3 different factors. The first factor is something called the X factor, which we're going to get into shortly. The next factor is your elbow extension, and the final is wrist uncocking. Just to recap, when we look at carry distance, it's dependent on launch angle, launch speed. We're more interested in launch speed when it comes to fitness. Launch speed is then dependent on bat speed and impact location. We're more interested in bat speed. And when we look at bat speed, there's 3 different factors here which we can impact to improve your game. What is the X factor then? The X factor is the degree of hip-shoulder separation. So if we look at our hips and shoulders when we're batting, and we imagine these 2 poles, so this top one is my shoulders, this bottom one is my hips. So if my hips move, that's going to move, my shoulders move, that's going to move. So as the bowler is running in and he starts to get ready to release the ball, our shoulders normally point either straight down the wicket or towards maybe even mid-off, and our hips either point straight down the wicket or clear a little bit to mid-on. Now, if we take a bird's eye view, at that point, the sticks are then going to be something like that, and then what that forms is an X, and then this angle in here is then known as the X factor angle. Now, if we continue to run through a delivery, the ball will be released. What then happens is the shoulders will turn even more, and the hips will probably open up even more. So especially as we start to step into the ball, our hips clear and shoulders will keep straight down the wicket, even up, maybe even a little bit more. So that X factor angle is increasing and getting bigger from there to there. Once we're there and our bat starts coming down, our hips tend to lead and rotate, and then our shoulders will rotate through and we'll hit the ball. What the research shows is the bigger we can make that angle, so on that turn, the bigger we can get that angle and degree of hip-shoulder separation, the more potential bat speed we're going to generate. So within the X Factor, there's 3 different areas that we're going to work on to increase that angle and increase our total bat speed. The first of those factors is rotational core power. So what we mean from rotational core power is how we can get our core to generate force going sideways or rotating. Why this is important is if you think about the X Factor when we're separating our hips and our shoulders, I want you to imagine that this rope is your core muscles. So when our hips and shoulders are in a straight line, our core muscles kind of don't have this tension or rotation on them, so they're nice and slack. As soon as we load up, rotate our shoulders, rotate our hips, and we turn one end opposite to the other, what that then creates is a lot of tension. So now we've got tension in the rope, tension in our core. When our hips then release and our shoulders release, that then unwinds, okay? So that unwinding, we have to first tense it to then rotate the other way. So to put that into action and practice our rotational core power, I like to do a lot of med ball work. So med ball work, you can do like pushing straight forward, but I like to do a lot of rotational stuff, especially when we're focused on power hitting. Often that involves kind of getting in an almost batting stance and throwing a ball into a wall as hard as you can. Now there's a few different variations with rotational stuff. You can kind of do sub-maximal work where you're looking at getting in high reps, or you can do more aggressive work where you're looking at giving it the beans and throwing it as hard as you can, creating a lot of power. So however you go about your rotational power work, whether you use resistance bands or you use med balls or maybe use a cable machine, there's many ways to work on it, but a lot of people leave that aspect out of their training. And it's a very big area where you get that transfer of training from the gym into your game. Our next key area to work on, still focused on the X Factor, and tip number 3 is our hip mobility. So we know that hip and shoulder separation are really important, and for that, we're gonna need to have really good control of our hips rotationally. There's quite a few drills that you can do to work on this, and probably the best drills you can do are actually stretching on the floor and mobilizing your hip joints. So whether that's a 90-90 stretch, we've got a 90-90 angle in your front knee, 90-degree angle in your back knee, and then you're turning over, and ideally you should be able to sit nice and upright, which a lot of people struggle with, and then you can dip, you can raise, or you can switch and rotate. So that's one way you can work on your hip mobility, and that's working on rotation as well. Another way is you can lock down your upper spine. So your spine is split into 3 different areas. You've got your lumbar spine at the bottom, midsection is your thoracic spine, top is your cervical, so that's your neck. What we want to be able to do is we want to be able to separate our lumbar spine from our thoracic spine. Now we can do drills where we lock down our shoulders or thoracic spine by holding something with straight arms, and then in this position we can then look to rotate our hips on a bit of an axis and get good engagement for our glutes and our core, and teach them how to move our pelvis accordingly, so that then when in the heat of the battle and in that pressure, before our shoulders go, our hips will be able to rotate. Where you'll see this best is you'll see it in pro golfers and baseball players as well. Baseball players are better at it than cricket players because ultimately baseball players know exactly where the ball's going to be. So they can swing as hard as they want in that range. They don't have to think about scooping it, blocking it, opening up through the covers, for example, or back foot shots. They've just got one shot where they can get really good at that power hitting position. Golfers are the same. The ball isn't moving, so they don't have to vary their technique. So they can go more aggressively into their power hitting. But what you'll see in a golf swing is players will have a big turn through their shoulders. So they've got massive hip-shoulder separation, the core's loaded up, and then at the top of that golf swing, probably should have my backhand straighter there if anyone's going to come at me for my golf technique, and then the hips will rotate first, and then the shoulders will go through. And just so I can watch myself on camera in my golf swing, we're going to do a full attempt through rotation, and the hips drive through much more aggressively than on a cricket player. Cricket players, we obviously don't go all the way over our head, but we do, you get players getting the toe of the bat to the sky, and then in that position, and you will see the best players, someone like Liam Livingston, the hips will really rotate and get through that ball. But If you can't, simply hold a stick in front and keep your shoulders still as you rotate your hips. You're not going to be able to separate your hips and shoulders and maximize that X factor at high speed. The third and final thing that we're going to work on for our X factor, so we've got rotational core power, hip mobility. The final thing is our thoracic mobility. The thoracic spine is an area where a lot of people are really tight. We have hunched postures, we have really tight backs, which mean that extending for our thoracic people find hard, and not only that, they then find rotation through their thoracic spine really tough as well. This drill I absolutely love for focus on hip shoulder separation. So we're going to take one foot, pop it against the wall, and then we're going to have like a bit of a quarter lunge position on this front leg. What pushing into the wall is going to do is it's going to lock down our hips. So our hips shouldn't be able to rotate much in this position if we're pushing into the wall, which is the same as in this position. When we're focused on moving our hips, we lock down our shoulders. Now we're focused on moving our shoulders, so we're going to try and lock down our hips. Then with a cricket bat or a stick or whatever you've got handy, you're going to take it into your chest like so. You're going to have your weight over your front, you're going to keep your belly button pointing forward all the way through, push back into the wall, and you're going to try and take the handle of the bat to the floor and rotate. So there, my shoulders have rotated, my hips have stayed quite square, got good tension through my core, and in that position you can push out and hold, bring it back in, rotate back to the start. Really nice way to work on separating your shoulders from your hips, focusing on that thoracic mobility and creating or increasing the range of X factor angle that you can have in your backswing. The next factor, not the X factor, to focus on our little checklist is elbow extension. So what we mean by elbow extension is at that point in the backswing, our elbow is flexed, it's then going to extend and swing through the ball. So if we can more powerfully extend our elbow through the ball, we're going to have more power. The muscles that are really important for elbow extension are our tricep muscles. Tricep muscles are pretty simple muscles to exercise really. I'm in a bit of a bodybuilder's gym here, so we've got a pretty manly tube on here for this. But essentially get on a cable machine, tuck your elbows in nice and tight to your body, palms facing down, and extend your elbow. And really important with this exercise, control it on the way back up and make sure those elbows stay pinned. So my elbows shouldn't be moving too much on the way up, hopefully. A lot of people, the elbows will kind of come forward to there and you're not actually getting anything through the shoulders, through the triceps. That's just my shoulders working. So really important, keep your shoulders back and down, elbows pinned, nice good extension through there. What you can also do, so your tricep, you've got obviously 3 different muscles in there. That will work some of them, but you also then want to work kind of some overhead work as well. So you can take whatever you're using, whether it's a cable, overhead there, and extend. And there, same thing again, focus on those elbows being nice and still, and kind of your pivot point, and get a nice contraction and extension through the elbow. As for making that movement more powerful, I'd say the best transfer of training is just to do top hand work where you're focusing on really powerfully extending through in your backswing. Tip number 6 is the final part of our kinetic chain, which is all to do with our wrist uncocking. So what you see the best players in the world do is they won't have their bat level there, they'll cock their wrists, so they'll flex their wrist, and then the toe of the bat will be pointing in the sky until the last moment of the swing, and then it will flick through and just add a little bit more power to the swing. Now there's a few different ways we can strengthen our wrist. I'm going to show you them now. But ultimately, we want to make this forearm really nice and strong. One simple way which we can strengthen our forearm is just get a really light dumbbell, pop your arm and elbow on a bench, and then just allow the dumbbell to extend your wrist and then flex it back up to the top and back down, and you'll feel and you'll actually see kind of all the muscles in your forearm working through that range of motion. I wouldn't overdo wrist and forearm work. Ultimately, if you're getting really strong in the gym and you're doing a lot of bicep, tricep, shoulder work, your forearms are always going to be working. That concludes this video. I hope you found that helpful. Just to recap, we've gone through 6 different fitness tips to allow you to hit the ball further more consistently. Tip number 1 is focus on your lower body strength so it can make better use of Newton's third law. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Tips number 2, 3, and 4 are all focused on the X factor, on our hip-shoulder separation. So we want to focus firstly on rotational core power. We want to focus on our hip mobility so we can rotate. And we also want to focus on our thoracic mobility so that we can separate our hips and shoulders with a greater degree of X factor angle. Tip number 5 is then our elbow extension. So we want nice strong triceps to be able to powerfully extend for our elbow. And finally, tip number 6 is then focus on our forearm and wrist strength to allow us to uncock our wrists just before the point of contact with maximum power. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It helps us to grow and reach more cricketers just like yourself. And if you're looking for more guidance on how to improve your power hitting and you want to start a S&C program that's specifically tailored to cricket power hitting, then we at CrickFit have that all on our app, which you can find more details about. You can email me at sam@crickfit.co.uk, or you can head to our website, crickfit.co.uk, to find plenty of options, whether you're a junior, adult, or just getting started in the gym. That's it for now, so I hope you found that helpful, and I'll be back soon with more cricket-specific fitness advice.